How is it going, everyone? Let us continue talking about the Bluepoint closure saga and highlight Detective Seed's great work in terms of gathering a lot of information on this story, and I will leave a link to his lengthy tweet going over a lot of the info, and some of it will be a little bit disappointing, even speaking on the Bloodborne remaster and remake potential, and it's like a lot of us had speculated as far as why a remaster that is essentially a license to print money to an insane degree at this point is not being done. But we'll talk all about it, and there's a lot of layers to this story, and let's go over it. So again, link in the description box below. Detective Seed's notes, Bluepoint Games' final report from Bloodborne Remake potential to Shuttered. I spoke to 4 Bluepoint employees, and this is their story on the timeline, dates, and code names for projects. So let's highlight everything. End of 2020, Bluepoint ships Demon's Souls Remake, and if you remember, Demon's Souls Remake was the true PlayStation 5 exclusive that was designed to be the system seller on the platform. Miles Morales was there for launch day, however, Miles Morales was a cross-gen title. There were games like Destruction All-Stars, but if you want to look at the true next-gen game that was the showcase for the PS5, I think Demon's Souls Remake was exactly that. Sony did not think that remakes and remasters made enough money, and some people within Bluepoint and Sony wanted to branch out. All heard that Shadow of the Colossus remake lost money, but it was assumed it would, but Yoshida wanted to preserve the game. I do think, in the case of SOTC, that was never going to be a juggernaut of a game in the sense that everybody would appreciate it. Like, that game is incredible in my opinion, but for the casual consumer, I could see why the argument would be made that you would just intend for that game to be created in the sense of it's such a beloved game within the core community, but you probably won't make a ton of money. But preserving the game, I do think it was great. I think that doing something like that, even though you know it has the potential to lose money, that is something that will build goodwill, and ultimately, if you build goodwill with your core audience, that will pay dividends, because that core audience is gonna be the audience that spends the most amount of money on your platform, and you want to keep them happy. I get that that's that's a metric that isn't easy to quantify, but I do think there's value there, even if upfront you lose a little bit of money, because think about over time, as well as more and more people talk about that game, that core audience appreciates that game, and again, that core audience is the ones that if you keep them happy, they're gonna spend money on the long term. Now, the alternative argument can absolutely be made is that the core audience, they are suckers, they're gonna support us no matter what, we don't have to cater to them. That is the argument on the other side of things, and I can see why Sony would make that argument if they're just absolutely chasing as much money as they humanly can. However, I do think crapping all over your core audience, there are ramifications and consequences to that, however less so when we are in a market environment where there is no direct competition. Shadow of the Colossus Remake's biggest criticism was the new face on the main character. However, Fumito Ueda wanted it to look that way and design it. There were conversations about doing add-on content to the remakes to help with funding into original content and grow design department. It was assumed in the studio that BP would be remaking Bloodborne after Demon's Souls. Bluepoint had a design department of 1 to 2 people, but was not sufficient for a full project. There was a quote in 2021, in early 21, after Demon's Souls, studio staff assumed they would work on Bloodborne and started to prepare. However, they did not get the green light due to internal politics of Bloodborne involving a fragile relationship with FromSoft, Sony, and the original IP. Sources do not think that Bloodborne Remake will ever be made due to politics. Here's where I have to push back a little bit. Ever is a long time. Ever is a very, very long time. If you told somebody 10 years ago that Halo would be on PlayStation, they would tell you that's never gonna happen. The world can change very, very quickly. Relationships can be mended, fences can be mended, and, you know, I just don't feel comfortable in ever saying ever. You know, maybe that's a little bit of a contradiction, but you get the idea. Something ever not happening or never happening, I just think we've seen too much in the world in general, not just gaming, in the world in general, that things can happen that you would never see coming. So I would pump the brakes a little bit on that. I still ultimately think, you know, that it will happen at some point. Whether it be next year, probably not. It's probably going to take a long time, but they will eventually, I hope, figure it out. Can you say that that's a heavy optimism? Sure. But again, I think time leans on my side. What's gonna happen? You know, we're gonna be waiting forever, and then I'm just gonna die, and then, you know, you guys can't attack me at the grave. You know, you were wrong about Bloodborne. Well, guess what? I'm already gone, so I'm gonna take that bet. But nonetheless, Bloodborne was pulled from the table, and BP had no project. BP was assigned to help with Ragnarok support. We all knew this, that they were helping with Ragnarok due to Sony Santa Monica Studio needing some help and a combo of other factors. Jim Ryan was pushing live service hard, and Sony had a desire to explore God of War into an Assassin's Creed style franchise. Can you just hear the vomit coming out? Imagine God of War going in the direction of Assassin's Creed, but you know what? The idea of live service as God of War, microtransactions, oh, yo, buy your double XP boost, buy this skin, buy that skin. We all know that was the holy grail that Sony desperately wanted Bluepoint to do when we had heard about the God of War live service title. Now, it was noted, Bluepoint was not allowed to make a game with Kratos as Santa Monica Studio. Sony did not trust BP with that, and it would be too expensive. Here's where I'll push back on that. I think God of War without Kratos loses a lot. It loses a lot. It's almost like Halo without Master Chief, and I get it that Reach was a thing, but, you know, Reach was an incredible game, and 3 ODST was a thing. I get that, but at the helm of God of War, it's gonna be Kratos. At the helm of Halo, it's gonna be Master Chief. Like, I feel like that character is so emblematic with God of War. That's why when some people were like, oh, Atreus is gonna take over God of War, I pushed back on that so hard. It's like, bro, do not send out an IP to lose so much of its appeal doing something like that. But I can understand why Santa Monica, Sony wanted to keep Kratos in-house to what Santa Monica was doing. And God of War as an IP does have value. Look, we can all understand why these decisions were made, but I digress. In September of 2021, Bluepoint is bought by Sony. Bluepoint is acquired and tasked with coming up with an original project in the God of War universe. The catch was they needed to stretch the content, but BP employees did not know at the time it was a live service game. Just hearing that stretch the content, yeah, get that engagement going. Get them playing the game for a long time so we can get their investment, and then the microtransactions. Like, we know what that means. Stretching the content is just vomit-inducing to me to hear about that out of a game, but you know, them's the breaks. That's how it goes with the live service games and chasing engagement. So, you know, it is what it is. They stated a gamble was made by Sony by convincing Sony to buy us instead of us looking to for funding elsewhere. After the acquisition, there was a change in culture within Bluepoint. Then it was noted prototyping begins for Demon Souls meets God of War. BP staff was not told initially that the game was a live service game. They still had a minimal design team. They did not have a game director for this project. End of 2022, Santa Monica Studios game director and designers joined the team. A lot of time was spent prototyping, but the mesh of Sony Santa Monica and Bluepoint did not go well. That generally will happen when you have new people coming in very soon. After Sony Santa Monica folks arrived, Bluepoint staff learned the game they were having to make was a live service game, and they needed to work with what they had. Maybe something you should give some insight on right off the bat if this is true. Like, that's kind of crazy. Internal issues began to arise, and the one on board with live service were the head shed at Sony Santa Monica Studios, Sony, and Bluepoint. It was unclear whether Bluepoint leadership believed in the project or just doing their best to salvage morale. About 75% of the staff employees, according to sources, were against this move and pushed back against making a live service game. Okay, that's good. After deadlines were not hit, internal staff strife from employees, the project was canceled by Sony in early 25. Bluepoint began pitching projects to Sony. Oh man, they pitched Jak and Daxter Remake. People would have loved that. Resistance Remake. People would have loved that. But inherently, I've talked about the issue with the Resistance Remake over and over again. They will not let you get a multiplayer game where you are going to be spending hours on that is not a live service game. And yeah, could they bake in live service elements to a Resistance Remake? They absolutely could. They could figure that out, but generally speaking, that would upset people in a different way. They're just not going to do it. A multiplayer game that's a multiplayer competitive shooter, they're not going to be competing with themselves in getting your hours for their multiplayer projects that they want to monetize for the long term. That's why inherently for the time being, I just don't think a Resistance Remake is something that they're going to do. If they decide to completely push away from live service or, you know, lessen the emphasis on that, yeah, things can change. But for now, for what Sony's focusing on, making a Resistance remake or a Killzone remake just doesn't make sense if you want that multiplayer intact. If it's just campaigns, look, I would love the Resistance campaigns were awesome. Your boy would love that, but I just think from an all-encompassing title with multiplayer, not gonna happen for the time being. Shadow of the Colossus remaster, updating it on PS5. Bloodborne Remake was again pitched. A small portion of the team worked on it for 2 to 3 months, but Sony pulled the plug. It was never officially greenlit. There was codenamed Black Fang, was a Ghost of Tsushima spin-off that Sony liked. Sony gave Bluepoint 5 to 6 months to prototype it until the end of March 26 to prove they could make it. Employees felt it was going okay, even though it was never officially greenlit and were on track to hit the deadline. Employees found out on February 19th that they were being shut down, and Project Black Fang is canceled. Studio last day is March 2nd, 2026. Bluepoint did use contractors, however, majority of the people stayed at the studio from Shadow until shuttering. About 40 employees there have been there the entire time. So again, credit to Detective Seeds. I'll put the full tweet in the description box below. Shout out to your named detective, by the way. This is some great detective work, getting all of this information. And I just think there's so many angles you can assess this from, and I think a lot of people can look at it from the vantage point of, hey, SOTC didn't make money. Now, we don't know if Demon's Souls made money, but bear in mind that Demon's Souls was a launch day title. And PlayStation 5, the amount of PS5s that were going to be out there were going to be limited. Even if it didn't make money right out the gate, it was used as the promotional vehicle for the console to sell the console. There's an inherent value in that that cannot be quantified directly. So I don't think we can assess Demon's Souls not meeting expectation. What were the expectations? There's only a limited amount of PS5s out there on launch day. SOTC is a game that I just don't think was ever going to do gangbuster numbers, and I'm sure they made money with Uncharted Nathan Drake collection. You kidding me? It was just a remastered collection, and if that is what Bluepoint was shifted to for a little while, why not? Infamous collection. Have Bluepoint do the Uncharted Golden Abyss remastered. That's fine. That's low risk, high return on investment. Again, that would make at least an okay amount of money and build some goodwill. Maybe they just don't see the value in that. They don't see the value in a softer return. Even if the investment is low, who's gonna buy an Infamous collection? Nobody's gonna buy that. It's must-sell architecture, bro. Who's gonna buy an Uncharted Golden Abyss remaster? Nobody's gonna buy that. No, I think people would buy it. I think people would be very happy, especially that core audience, which that core audience is where you are eroding a lot of that goodwill. And again, I get that there's the argument, the core audience is the suckers, man. They're suckers. We'll never lose them. And I know that's how a lot of entities feel. And maybe you won't lose them because there's not a direct head-to-head competitor there for them to go to. And maybe a lot of them don't want to move to PC gaming, but I still think losing the interest and the goodwill from the core consumer, that does matter. That does matter, and I just don't think it's something you want to do, and I think it was easily avoidable. Just have them work on something else, and we all know that at this point, Bluepoint is a beloved studio. People like Bluepoint, and even if SOTC didn't make a profit, Demon's Souls, again, was a launch day title, give them the opportunity to do something that would have been a quick turnaround and then go from there. But again, they pitched a Jack remake. If this is true, they pitched a Jack remake. So for all of you that wanted Jack and Daxter to come back, guess what? You're not getting it back, but Sony damn well will invest more resources into Horizon Hunting and Gathering, more live service nonsense, but they'll shut down Bluepoint. Think about that for a second, and let that really digest. So that'll do it for me. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Again, link to Detective Seeds' Twitter and tweet in the description box below. Thank you for watching. Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comment section down below, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.